Welcome in Food for Thought. And today, Algernon from the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis Discord server will present his new project called Neologos. So, Algernon, what is Neologos and how did you come up with that idea?
What it is a method, kind of like a live polling situation where imagine like a podcast where the podcaster is live streaming and he can or she can put a question to the audience. And then the audience on their phones or desktops can go, oh, yeah, I don't like that much. But the idea is creating a way for that crowd of people who are listening to be able to respond in aggregate. And I call it aggregate response communication arc. Uh, but it's not new. Like we've done this before. We do polls. We've done live polling of audiences, and there's software that does this for educational environments. The idea here is to try to do that, to use that technology to engage a crowd in a conversation. So have one person who is talking to say 100 people, and then have that 100 people be able to respond. So
Ooh.
now they can't all just say anything they want, of course, because that's just going to be cacophony, but they can feed all their responses back in. Um, Depending on the different question types, like if you're just asking a 1 to 10 type question, um, multiple choice type questions, those are easy to aggregate. How many people said A, B, C, D, and you show a little graph or something. I really want the graphs and stuff to be, I'm going to design that so that's modular because I really want it to be entertaining. And bar charts and pie charts are not entertaining, but you can represent, proportions in a gajillion different ways. Anyway, part of it is that every time the audience is asked a question, um, and you allow some amount of time for an answer, you can look at the display, which is like an aggregate display. Um, and that is probably be a couple modes. One mode where it's like as it comes in, you see it develop, and another mode where it's hidden until the end, and then there's the big reveal. And probably the person asking the question gets to decide which of those two. But the as people respond, you see like, oh, there's more yeses, there's more nos, there's more people who haven't responded to this question. And so, unlike a lot of things on the internet right now, this this would demand your attention. So if you were a member of this, if you were, I was going to say listener, and the problem is that that crosses the domain. Like we listen to a lot of stuff, but passively. So the people participating in this are not just listeners because they have to respond. So they're listening and then they respond and they're listening. So it's a conversation that goes back and forth. And so your attention, like you could be asked a question at any moment. So your attention really has to be on the conversation that's going on. Um, and it's my hope, and I don't know, that we can hone this back and forth between the group that's responding and the person who's talking to them, to the point where it feels almost like a conversation, even though you're talking to an aggregate of minds. And people are always conflicted. So the mind doesn't always have to be, in full agreement. Like you could say,
Mm-hmm.
what do you guys think about this? And see visually, everybody see, like, oh, that's what we think about that. I didn't know that half of us disagreed with what I just agreed with. There'll be a lot of
Oh.
opportunities for people to see, for the particular crowd that gathered for that Neologo session, just because you get a mix of people, uh, what that crowd thinks. Um, so the bigger so what is Neologos? Neologos is using this, um, aggregate response communication to try to hold a conversation between people. And I'd like those conversations to be something like dialogos, something like, at least the one I want to model is what Neologos is supposed to be a common exploration. So it's not the host saying, this is how it is. It's the host trying to explore some topic, to really communicate, to have a conversation as you would with another person, hopefully about some topic that matters. Um, and not just put this like in some kind of entertainment space. People will use it for that eventually, where it'd be fun for game shows and things. Um, but I really want it to, if this became popular, it would be like a new mode of human communication. Because normally we could do one to one, and then we can do where we just speak to one person. We can do one to N people. So that's broadcast, TV, radio, writing. But we never can do N back to one. So the crowd can never respond, except in the case like, audience can clap, and people who've been in front of live audiences know that there is a conversation that goes on in that space. But as we went to digital and separated ourselves from the audience by that digital channel, you don't get those feedbacks. And broadcast is broadcast. So, you put out a video and there's the people are watching it days or weeks later. There's no opportunity for back and forth. So that's like a purely consumptive type thing that has been incredibly popular. And I think we're moving into a phase where people are going to demand more from their, I was going to say entertainment, but from their attention, where
Mhm.
they're going to want interaction. And in like video games, I think is rather partly because it's interactive. Like you have to do something and there's response, and it's an engaging thing because of that, as opposed to just passively watching things. And so I'm hoping that Neologos can be an engaging type conversation where people want to participate because they get heard. Like they will be one little person in that audience, and we could show our graphic. So you would be one of the people in that audience, one of those orange circles there. So envision this as there being a host who might have a guest, and they would be doing a normal live stream as on a variety of different platforms. And then in addition to that, they would use a Neologos server, and people would they distribute a link. It would be like joining a Zoom room kind of a thing, except you actually have an interface to respond to questions. And those are the participants. And then in addition to that, you can have a whole bunch of live viewers who can just see what answers are coming in from the audience. So I'm hoping that can feel like a conversation more so than what we have now, right? Like right now, I'm talking to you so we can engage with one another, but the audience at any given point might be very informing to our conversation to know what people are thinking about such a certain thing, and to be able to ask them and then see their response. Um, that will be a level of engagement with an audience that will be, I think, once people start getting that, they'll kind of insist that their media do that, that they be able to interact with it.
Hmm.
So I thought it would be interesting to model, uh, what would be good conversations for people to have with that. That's part of the reason why I think this is a good fit to start with the Awakening from the Meaning Crisis community, uh, especially the early participants in this. The software may be a bit rough because it'll be a prototype. Um, and but I'll need people to to actually try to use the software, so that we can figure out how we can change it to make it more conversational. Like it may be really clunky at first, or it may be too slow, or we have to figure out how the response is, like how long do you wait for everybody to respond before you let the conversation go on.
Mhm.
Anyway, there may be things like that, and the audience has to be kind of mindful, I think, as they use this. This is the early volunteers, let's say. Um, you know, to be able to recognize in the conversation, like, I really want, like, I can't, I need a button that lets me interrupt or something, and to recognize that and let me know, oh, this is what was going on for me. This is why this doesn't work for conversation, or this is how I intuit it might be better. And it strikes me that the type of people that would be attracted to John Vervaeke's work um, might make good participants for that early testing group. That'll help me build out the framework and let us have, I think, some really interesting conversations.
Thank you for the introduction. I noticed you said the participants, so they are seen by the viewers, but in order to maintain attention, the viewers have to show the respond, or do they have the option and they don't have to actually respond?
I see this as the participants aren't seen. The only people seen like on stream here would be the
Ah,
host, and then if they're streaming with somebody. So they're the only ones doing video probably, and doing like a live audio channel with one another. The participants aren't even like on a phone call. The only connection the participants have is via the ARC, the aggregate response. So a question will be put to them, their phone or desktop, bing, and they'll see the question and then just respond. And it's hopefully going to be done so that it's really easy to quickly, like one touch, respond to things, so that we can get close to conversation. And because I really want to open up that level of communication, I think it's going to be fascinating.
So what? How do the viewers engage? They only
Ah,
see.
so the viewers actually came pretty late in this diagram. Um,
Mhm,
but it occurred to me that there's a lot of people who I would like them to see the process, see the conversations, especially if we start having really good conversations. Um, because if people who have big followings start using something like this, that's just, people will want to see that. I would love to have see that recorded. And so I want those things to be, viewers to be able to see that. And a lot of people may not at first want to participate, like I want to see it before I get in there. I'm not sure if I want to, what is this thing before I get involved? Uh, but I'll look at it, and I think having a viewer, just pure viewer, like, just looking, that's super useful. At first, I'm like, no, they have to participate. And then I realized, no, it's relax. Like it should be an open public conversation. That's another, I guess, key design principle of the Neologos project is ultra transparent. Like every question, every answer is there. So there's not like a mysterious AI level that you don't know what it did to your response. You're like, no, that's what happened. So that's one of the design principles, to make it transparent. So I see the viewers as they're not participating, they're just viewing, which is what we have mostly now. But then the participants, well, now they get to be heard. They get to see their responses up on the screen. The host is going to be responding to what they're saying in aggregate, possibly disagreeing. Um, but they get to participate. And then I figured that kind of creates some envy, because some of the viewers would be like, hey, I have strong opinions about that question you just asked. And you're like,
Okay.
yeah. So I think you should sign up and, next time get in the participant thing. And from some of our experiences on the server and some of our live interactions, I realized that people having a commitment and saying like,
Mhm.
no, if you're going to participate in this thing, you have to be there at that time at the beginning, and there's a framing. And so one of the things that Neologos has is a waiting room. So before the session starts, so you schedule a session, you're like, it's going to happen at 9 a.m. whatever time. And that's when you show up, but like the interaction part starts 30 minutes later. So that first 30 minutes or whatever time, maybe it's 15, is like a gathering time where everybody who's all the participants are in, and they've all got a little interface, and I want them to be able to kind of chat each other up and stuff in there or something, interact a little bit like backstage. But anyway, you have to be there at the beginning in order to be one of the participants in the Neologos discussion. There's a framing for it. There's an opening. There's sort of probably going to be some prompts about telling people, framing how they should hold their responses and, what their job is, as it were, as a participant. And I don't want people just like coming and going out of that. Like, I want to take that from what we've learned, that just having a little frame and saying, yeah, this is what it is. This is what our commitments are. We're trying to be a certain way in our responses, truthful, that, and then you start, and that sets a frame, and it makes it a lot more formal. Whereas if it's just, yeah, you can show up at any time, you can just sort of join up in a conversation, and now you're a participant, and they start asking questions, and you can just start spewing trash all over whatever that group was talking about. We can flood into somebody else's thing. See, I don't want that. I want a group of people who are like, we're going to have a conversation about topic such and such. And then
Mhm.
they kind of have, in a sense, a closed room, the participant and the hosts, for the period of the Neologos.
If I understood correctly, viewers are watching the host interacting with the participants, basically.
Yeah. So that aggregate display that I have there in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
that's probably a web page um, that is like mobile friendly if you're on mobile, or it's on a desktop. But it would basically, it'd probably usually be a graph of some sort,
Mm-hmm.
or a pictorial representation of the sum of everybody's answer to the last question. And then it would probably also show like what the last question was. But anyway, so everybody's looking at that aggregate display. The viewers can see it, and the participants can see it, and the host can see it. So it's really, to the host, it's, I ask a question and then I look at the aggregate display, and that's my answer. And it's a group of people. So it's not, I can ask a yes, no, and I'm going to get some amount of yes and some amount of no. So it'll be different than talking to a one person, but there'll be a form of conversation that I hope can occur.
So the concept is very clear, at least to me. I hope to the viewers it
Okay.
is also clear. And if not, guys, please vote. And I, I was first imagining it is something like Twitter Spaces, but it's not. It's different from Twitter Spaces. Because it's like you have more options of actually interacting with the host or and co-host, what whoever is there, and the aim
Hmm.
would be just to interact with audience. So this aggregate is like a representation of collective cognition.
Yeah. And I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
directly is that.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess partly what brought this up for me was, there's a couple of experiences, but the most recent one, you mentioned Twitter Spaces. It's very frustrating to me on Twitter Spaces. Like, you can step up and take the mic and then have your rant, and it probably I haven't done it yet, but probably feels good. Um, but a lot of people don't want to do that. they want to have their little say. They'd like to participate in the conversation, but maybe not in quite like I don't want to grab the mic and there's only like 8 people talking. Now I got some stranger yelling at me. You're like, I just wanted to say my bit kind of thing. And it struck me as I'm using Twitter spaces. I'm like, it doesn't do any of that. Like you can't even they gave you a silly little you can click somewhere and put like a heart on something and they're passing emojis now. And anyway, this is another form of that. It's the group response. And all of these social media places are realizing that this whole back channel of group responding to the people is actually really sort of valuable real estate.
I
Like
like
it's
it.
people because people like to be heard, people like to engage, and I think it's going to change the relationship between podcasters and their audiences, and in a good way because people are already following their shows and they're like the host has to just sort of assume, oh, this is the kind of people that follow me, and they'll build in their head, what are these people like. But if they can interact with them, they'll see all sorts of nuance. They'll say, oh, okay, there's some group of people that follow me for this reason, some people that follow me for that reason, and they're going to get like a more nuanced view of their own audience. But their audience is their audience because they chose to be, to continue to be there over time, trolls aside.
Yeah, speaking of trolls, I
Mm,
was thinking about the screening system because do we want to avoid feedback loop? So we only talk to people who agree with us, and our audience, they're watching us because they agree with us, and like
mm,
they want to get the information that kind of fits already preconceived notions, or there is a screening process where you get people who hold different beliefs. How would that look like? So what is the idea there? I mean, of course, you can get a troll one once or twice, but I don't think
mm.
he will actually be very massive on the aggregate display. Or he might be voted out.
I hope not. So it wasn't really a design goal to mute the troll, but as you point out, it's like you are in this response one fragment of the sum, and so you can squeak all you want, but you're not dominating over the rest of the thing. So the host has a tremendous amount of control on the conversation there, whoever the host is talking to directly. So that'll be harder for the trolls. But I do hope that the kind of the minority opinion shows up here. So whenever you put a question in your audience and they, like how many of you agree with whatever, and you get some rating, maybe sometimes in your dialogue you say, oh, all right, I'm just going to go with the majority, but occasionally you should stop and think about that minority vote and go, what are you people thinking? Like, if you disagree with that, what do you think? And then, try to ask some sort of a probing question so that you can better understand why they might have answered the way they did so a few people disagreeing with you shouldn't just be some matter where you say, oh, dismiss that. It's a few people, it's 2 out of 100. Sometimes you should say, I am really curious what those 2 out of 100 think.
Yeah.
And the framework is going to allow you to do that, where you'll be able to put a question to some fragment of the audience. So sometimes you put the question to everyone, but you will be able to put it based on their answer. So, like if you asked a question and 100 people, 99 said yes and 2 said no, you would then be able to say, all right, I'm doing a poll. Of the 2 who said no, this question is just for you. And then you enable their interface. Only those 2 will have their interface enabled for that response, that next response. See, and that's going to enable kind of a fun level of interaction.
Yeah. Investigating the fringe idea, let's say.
Mm-hmm.
I like
And
that.
you may when you're doing that just run into somebody who's kind of putting trolly answers in there. to get the attention. So in that sense, you may. But I think sometimes you go down there and you may find, a dissenting opinion and say, "Oh, all right, well that was interesting." And so I'm hoping that people who find this kind of interface, like some hosts, I think might find this an interesting way to engage with their audience.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So as far as I understand, the actual tool would be to interact with the audience, but the way to interact would depend on the host. If the host decides to investigate the minority idea, let's say, they will do that. Or if the host will decide to kind of elevate or dive deeper into the idea that majority holds, then it's that. We are talking about the actual tool, not the culture of the host. So I wanted to ask, what other applications would be there for the tool?
Um, One of the ones that stands out for me is the idea of using this as a teaching tool. Um, this goes a little bit into the podcaster space. Some of the podcasters that I've followed there for a bit, uh, like in medicine, are excellent instructors. Like you could just tell that they've done, complicated diagrams and led audiences through complicated molecular pathways and seen confused looks come on their students' faces. Um, and it struck me that like some people are really good at that level, and drawing in addition. Shout out to Dr. Mobeen. Uh, the idea of them being able to use something like the Neologos framework um, to then interact with students, because now you can't really hold a class with 1,000 students online. Like it's too much. Or could you? Like if you were that lecturer and you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to lecture and I have like 1,000 students in my class, and now I'm going to use this thing, and now I can put the questions to the 1,000 students, and I can say, all right, who understands this pathway? And then, or do you understand this aspect of this thing? And pull the audience, prune out maybe like some people and say, okay, now is the confusion more this or is it more that? And be able to direct your conversation to try to keep your students with you. Plus, just the view of, what are they finding understandable and what are they not finding understandable? That's going to hone your teaching. It's going to fit what you're giving to that audience a lot better than just the blank stares, or worse, like you're just talking to a camera. You're like, I don't know how the 1,000 people out there are, how this is, what levels they're at, and whether they're understanding it. But if I could see a display and ask, these kind of questions in a structured way, I could interact with them in a way that would be useful. And then, when you get students who are still too confused, you're like, you need to sign up for the online tutoring with, and have somebody do like Uber tutoring. Um, anyway, there's this using this in education is like a non arguable point. Like this is a beautiful application for that. Is more contentious. The place that I think intersects with the awakening from the meaning crisis Discord is that I think there's an application here for this to be used to have uh, social, maybe societal is the better level. Like I don't just mean like people chatting like in Twitter space, um, but for societies to be able to talk, like even at that kind of a scale. Like if you scaled this up and you had a 10,000 person room session and some hopefully talented and appropriate people leading the conversation, and maybe some vetted experts or something. Uh, and then you can see the audience responses, and these two, one or two experts can interact with the group. I think that can be like epic level engagement, like not a debate. And it's not just some pure, I got to get score points or whatever, but like you're interacting with the audience saying, do you guys understand this? And you can see, and you go, ah. And this scales to levels where, we talk about these, how many people watch the 6 o'clock news. Imagine if you were talking to all the people who were watching the 6 o'clock news. That's an entirely different level of an event, right? You would know 30 million people were watching Fox last night, and this is exactly what they thought. Uh, it's a different level of engagement than we've ever had. And I wonder if this kind of stuff is not going to be part of the cultural shifts that are undergoing now, and
We
that
are
this will
moving
enable
towards it. Yeah.
cultural conversations in a way. I think this could be an enabling technology to that. But people are going to people all over this, and there'll be good conversations and there'll be crappy conversations. But it's not
I
the technology, it's how we're going to use it. And so part of the Neologos project is to sort of seed the kinds of conversations that I think will be helpful and healthful, as opposed to just using it as an entertainment or another a platform to beat up on people or something, to spread hate.
I have a question about this being a plug-in, let's say. If you could plug it into YouTube, if you could plug it into Twitter Space, if you could plug it into a Discord voice chat area, let's say, or should it be its own separate thing? Like,
it would be a lot of, there's two parts of this. It would be a lot of technical effort to make all those different plugins, because those are all actually different software interfaces. And it would narrow the audience to each of those platforms. So, for example, if there were a Twitch thing, then you'd be reaching Twitch people, or a YouTube thing, you'd be reaching the YouTube people, or Discord people. So that was part of it. And then the other thing is I realized I'd rather leave it as a small prototype type project. And by keeping it simple and browser based and not integrating it, then it becomes universally compatible with all those platforms, because I can listen to you on Twitch and still use a Neologos interface, just have a browser open. And so now it's entirely compatible with all of those platforms without, complicating itself.
So first you have to make it compatible with browsers then.
Yeah, it's basically just you're gonna go to a website, maybe by QR code, be the easy way to do it. So for a given, someone says, we're having a Neologos at 8 p.m. at this time, sends out some announcement thing, and there's a link, and the link probably doesn't work until the time of. And then when you go to there at the time of, that's sort of your ticket, and that gets you into the waiting room, and then like a Zoom call, but at a certain time.
Oh, okay. I get it. So how about, let's say, do you see the idea of future integration? Let's say the possibility if it grows.
Yeah, if it grew, it would be, or if the companies start saying like, oh, this is a good thing, or people really enjoy doing this, but this is just a prototype. So
No, it's actually an excellent idea. I love it. I actually see the future because you're right. We are moving towards that. And I see that the struggles you have with the Twitter Spaces dynamic, a lot of people have. Like it's relatable, and you as a problem solver, you came up with the solution, and this is it. And I actually think it has a future. Like I believe in it.
I do too.
Yeah. It's good idea. I really actually like the slide as well. Like I really love it. I wanted to ask you how people can support it. how
Ah,
people can contact you, and what work do you need actually to be done.
so let's start with we'll go take them in order here. What what can people do to help me? Uh I guess at this point I just need is even too strong. I'm gonna need an audience. I'm gonna need participants. Um because we're gonna have to try the prototype. Actually, we're probably gonna have to try the prototype a lot of times because software engineering. And I'm gonna do the software engineering using an AI. I've already started. Um, I have decades of experience as a software engineer from NVIDIA Corporation. So, assuming I can still remember how to code, I can code this thing. And with the AI, it makes it a little even more doable. For the level of implementation that I want to do for the prototype, I think that'll be fine. Like if it goes further, then it'll be formalized into something. But for the prototype, I can do that. But what I can't do is the audience and getting feedback of what it's like to use it, like where they need help, where the interface is in their way, or just their experience of it. The feedback from people attempting to have Neologos sessions, some of which may go well, some may go not well. But that feedback loop is going to be, I think, critical to developing it, and that engagement, I think, will help motivate me as well.
I I think it's doable. Like if you can build the actual tool and the prototype, uh, we can gather the crowd. I think we will
We
make
gather
the
the crowd,
announcement.
and then we have to have good conversations on it.
I just like I can, yes, good conversation. We can always make it happen. There are so many people with ideas.
And so I think if you do that, and then the people who are attending those sessions come away with like, that was good, there you go, because then they'll
Hmm.
come back and they may mention it, and then you're off to the races. Uh, and then I think that'll generate large enough audiences that it will really get interesting because we'll have some conversations that just never occurred in the history of humanity. So that'll be fun. Somebody's got to do it. First million person conversation. Come on.
Yeah,
That's that'll be amazing.
like a million people conversation real time.
Real time, a million people in one conversation where you say
Yes.
like, hello world, and you're talking to a million people. It's different from having a million followers or a million people see your video if it's like interactive.
Yeah.
So I feel like humanity is going to do these things one way or the other. And we're on the cusp and we've all got these devices in our hands. So let's see.
I love that. Algernon, would you like to add something before we close up? I like
Yes.
actually think it was perfect.
So you can find me if you're interested in being part of I guess, the prototype participants for this. Um, then there'll be like some early conversations where we'll try to use the framework, and there may be some organizational type meetings where I just get feedback on some of the ideas around the software implementation. Uh, so if you're interested in participating in those discussions, and then the use of the prototype, uh, I'm associating this with the Awakening from the Meaning Discord uh, because it's a good audience, it's a good group of people there, and this is in line. I think the types of conversations that we're going to try to have with this prototype are an excellent exercise that are right in line with the server's direction. So you can reach me there. Algernon 1010 is the tag, and I participate in a number of things on that server. So You'll probably see me around, as it were. And I'll put out some announcements on that server about discussions about the Neologos project and where it's at and where the prototype is at. And we'll get this thing going.
Excellent. I will provide the links below. Check them out. Thank you for your time and attention. Thank you, Algernon. Please support that project. I surely will.
Thank you.
See you in the next Food for Thought. Bye.
Any part of this that you have further question about that you want to go into?